Thanks to everyone for coming in today. Welcome on behalf of the campus to the 32nd edition of the Archives Public Lecture Series. And I'm very, very happy to have Sundar here from the Roja Muthiah Research Library. We've actually been wanting to have him, we've been wanting to invite him to come and spend a week with us, at least to just spend time at the archives. And just at the time when we were going to do that, the whole thing changed earlier this year. But in any case, hopefully we should be able to do that sometime early next year, Sundar. So Sundar's here to give a talk on collective memory and the public library, a topic that's perhaps quite close to the heart of the archives, as well as a space that thinks of itself as a public gathering space. So the archive at NCBS is a public center for the history of contemporary biology in India. This opened in February 2019. And the public lecture series that we run is a set of monthly talks around sort of explorations in and around archives, where we've had discussions by artists, archivists, historians, teachers, journalists, scientists, and others. And I'll share the link for all the past talks that we've had since 2018 into the chat window after my introduction. So Sundar is currently the director of the Roja Muthiah Research Library and has been at the library since its inception in 1994. Trained as an archivist, he has worked on a number of preservation projects with grants from the National Endowment for Humanities, the Wellcome Institute for the History of Understanding of Medicine, the Mellon Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and the Endangered Archives Program. He's also been a consultant to various centers, including UNESCO, the Center for Studies in Social Sciences in Kolkata, the Madan Puraskar Pustakalaya in Nepal, and the Satyajit Ray Foundation in Kolkata. He's the author of the book, The Tall Man, Biju Patnaik, and has written several articles, including a notable piece on the place and history of the Jaffna Public Library, which he will talk briefly about today as well. So Sundar, thank you so much for your time, and I'll hand it over to you now. Thank you. Just need to unmute yourself, Sundar.
Thank you very much, Venkat. I'm so happy to be part of this program. Let me just open my share, right? 1 second. Yeah. All right, so this is visible, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So good afternoon to all of you. This term collective memory, there has been several attempts to conceptualize the idea of collective memory, and oftentimes it is related to linguistic and narrative phenomena. But I would like to extend this collective memory also to sort of collected memory that is in print, which is stored in public libraries, and libraries and public can be also public library. So thank you once again. So let me move on to my presentation. I thought I would first start with showing the libraries that have been destroyed in historical times. This is not something very recent, but this has always been happening, not just specific to a particular region, but also around the world. Starting from Alexandria Library, you see a number of libraries that has been burned down, destroyed for various reasons. For various reasons, and of course, the one library which is very, very close to our heart is the Jaffna Public Library, which was burned down in 1981, and I'll talk very briefly about it. But there are intrinsic and extrinsic factors. Let me first show you some of the intrinsic factors that is disintegrating libraries in India. Denia Patel once wrote in a series of articles in the New York Times talking about the apathy in archives and libraries in India. This is one of the libraries, one of the government libraries in New Delhi, and see how people have preserved this manuscript wrapped in an old newspaper, tied with some kind of rope. And these are libraries in Chennai. On the right side, you see Some papers are being lifted up in a book-bound volume, and that book has been laminated. In fact, when we opened a shelf in a library, the entire books were laminated. And see, that's what happens after time when we laminate books. What happens is, the laminate, the adhesive in it, and the paper become one integral part, and they deteriorate very fast. And in fact, we say that we have given a death sentence to the book. So lamination should not be done. And the other images, you see how bundles of books have been kept, and in one library, they have packed these books in very rare, unique books in gunny bags. So this is the state of libraries, and in fact, these are very, very, very important material. When we went and opened the gunny bag, we found extremely important information, like Sudesa and so on. This is a library in Kadalur. And this is a government-run library in Pudukkottai. In government libraries, what happens is after some time, the old books are withdrawn when new editions come in. So often these are sold to Radiwalas. But in this case, we salvaged some of the books. But when the difference between a library and archives, in an archive does have all the editions of a particular item, but in libraries, it's simply throw away the older editions. But which means there is no policy of storing old books or sending old books to an archive. This is a library in Nagapattinam. I must say that I must share a story here. Once we went, I think this was in the year 2004 when we went there. You see this loft, and there was a very important book which was published in 1797. And I asked this collector who had kept this book there if he can donate the book to our library. Immediately refused to put the book back in that loft. 10 years later, in 2014, when we went to the same library, I asked him if he remembered this book, and he had completely forgotten. Then I asked him if I can go to the place, and I was allowed, and I put my hand on the loft, and I found the book lying there for 10 years, just there, and it has not moved out. So nobody has used that book. And then I asked him whether he would consider this time, and at that time he donated the book to us. So there are several such material lying on lofts and other locations, godowns in our libraries in India. This is a library in Nagarpur, and this is also very valuable material. This library has very valuable material. But see how the library is being used. It's used like a godown. Everything and anything goes into the library room. This is another important collection in Madurai. So this newspaper, probably the only place where they store this newspaper is in this office in Madurai, and it's Janasakti, a communist newspaper. And when we were looking for preserving this old material related to communist movement, we identified this, and this is how they have stored this newspaper. So this is my point is, these are the intrinsic factors, factors that we are there is apathy within librarians and archivists as how to store material, how to preserve material, and we have lost a lot of material due to this carelessness. So, and that's what I thought I'll show you this to begin with, and now I'll leave you with these things, and I'll move on to the most important thing for me. The Jaffna Public Library, which was established in the year 1933. The idea of this Jaffna Public Library actually came when the Nazis were burning Jewish material, Jewish collection all over Germany, in 1933. It was around the same time. So the idea was to start a central free library in Jaffna. And for this, support came from the public through by means of crowdfunding. And they had several methods, like, they had set up a lottery scheme to collect money, and also from philanthropists. Money as well as collections were donated to the Jaffna, this central library. And the idea also was not to just have Tamil collection, it was also to have other language material in the collection. So with this novel idea, as early as 1933, Dr. Ranganathan, Dr. S.R. Ranganathan, is considered to be the father of library science in India, was invited as a consultant, and he provided ideas as to how to set up this library. And quickly a plan was drawn, and the entire collection was moved to the Jaffna, this building that you see here, called the Jaffna Public Library. Just before 50 years, it reached its golden jubilee. It was burnt in 1981. And again, quickly, it was also rebuilt. But, I wanted to pose this question of why these libraries are being targeted. What makes somebody burn a library? What kind of intention, what motivates somebody to burn a library? And what is the intention behind? In this instance, it is very easy to say that it was there was an ethnic program, and the opponents wanted to punish the Tamils because of certain reasons, that there was some kind of an intellectual superiority that the Tamils were priding themselves with. Therefore, they wanted to teach a lesson, and it was burnt. But whatever was collected as public memory, the entire collective memory was completely burnt. Not even a single leaf of paper was left behind. And what you see here is a newly built, patched up and then resurrected building in 2003. This was a time when I visited the Jaffna Public Library. I was sent to, I was visiting this place as the UNESCO sent me to visit the library to assess the collection and also see what the needs were there at the time. But the idea of building the library, there were two major ideas. One faction of the people did not want to build the library. They wanted to leave the building as it is, to show cause to the world, entire world, that such a thing had happened, and it should be there as a memorial. Then there was other faction which wanted to completely move on, and they wanted to rebuild this and to show the world that Tamils can do this. So quickly, the Sinhala government also responded to that faction and supported with a little money. And of course, money was raised from other sources to rebuild this in 2003. If we have to understand the Jaffna Public Library, we have to look at the history behind the library, the history of Tamils, the history of, especially in the modern period. The intellectual consciousness in Jaffna goes back to the 16th century, when the missionaries came and set up educational institutions and provided missionary education. And there was a new elite. And quickly, there was also a response to that from the Shaivite. So there was an interaction between the Shaivite elite and also the missionary educated. Of course, all of them were educated in the same schools, but there was an interaction between this and that consciousness actually rose out of both this missionary education and the Shaivite's response to it. And the Jaffna Library represents that integral part of that consciousness. So we need to keep that in mind. So, and also that the rise and fall of the library is a reminder of the history of Tamils' achievement in Sri Lanka. And the ethnic conflict took place not just in one day. It was a simmering problem that the Tamils were really getting educated well and took the high positions in bureaucracy, judiciary, and in all walks of life. So this was not easily taken by, digested by the other side. And the Jaffna Library became the symbol of intellectual superiority. So we all know that if you target a language, entire memory of the community is lost. What happens is in a traditional community, in a traditional society, communities held the wisdom and knowledge. But then that was all in oral tradition. During the modern period, especially after the arrival of the print culture, things were changing, and also when families are disintegrating, libraries become a very important space. So this becomes a repository of that knowledge. The knowledge that was in people's in communities has shifted to spaces such as libraries, archives, and museums. So now, what was the knowledge in a particular language is now in that print material. So when people wanted to target a particular language, so it is easy to target a library. Library is such a soft target for people. And as a punitive measure, people walked in and just simply burnt the entire collection of the Jaffna Public Library. And there was about 100,000 items by then. The library was not just an important space, but also an imperative space for the community in Jaffna. The library owed to the enterprising nature of the people and their emphasis on the community. We have to see, how this library and the library culture spread, and how intellectualism was celebrated, knowledge was celebrated in the community, should be understood. During this wartime, when there was lack of resources, libraries were the only source where newspapers, magazines, and books were bought. So people have to go to this place to read newspapers. Sometimes, when I went to Jaffna, I heard this story from one person where he said, in an office, in a factory setup where about 40 to 50 people were working, they'll simply borrow the newspaper from the library, and one person was given the responsibility to read the newspaper. So he will put carton boxes and sit over that, and people were working around him, and he would simply read the newspaper. He or she would read the newspaper loudly, like as if he was a news reader. And this will go for the entire day. Again, this person has to read one newspaper after another, and also in batches for different people, from different groups of people. And this would go in turn. People would take turns to do this job every day. So it was so serious. Reading was such a serious affair. Libraries was such a serious affair. And these people owe a lot to this library. Also because, during school education, what people do is 4 or 5 boys will get together and hire a room near the library. And, one person would be allowed to borrow 1 or 2 books. So these 5 boys will be able to take almost 10 books on different subjects, and they will have access to all the books that they require for an examination. So they will prepare for the exam and share the books as they rent this house near the library. And they have the proximity to the library, so it would be easy for them to exchange books. And once the job is done and they pass their grades, when they pass out of the school, and parents take that very seriously, and they offer something to the library. As there's this ritual when we have we offer pongal to for various religious functions. So pongal is offered to the goddess Saraswati, because the goddess Saraswati is considered to be the goddess of learning. So Jaffna Public Library was equated with a temple. So people used to celebrate and offer to goddesses. So that kind of feeling and connection they had to the library. And after they get a job, they will contribute back to the library, either monetary or by buying books and giving to the library. In a way, the Jaffna Library was almost a national library for a Tamil nation without a state. So when the library was pulled down, burned, the next day, somebody died of shock on hearing this news, because for them it was such a dear thing. And several scholars have written about it, but I thought I'll just share a couple of things. The celebrated scholar Karthikesa Sivathambi in Sri Lanka said Tamils have lost an intellectual heritage. And Professor A.R. Venkatachalapati, he has described that the library's destruction was a cultural onslaught coinciding with the military occupation. By the time when this library was burned, there was more than 40,000 palm leaves. Books like Yarpana Vaibhav, the only copy, Udaya Tarage, which is a bilingual magazine started by the missionaries. In Tamil, it's called Udaya Tarage, and in English, it's called Morning Star. Books and periodicals and hundreds of microfilm rolls. Everything was burned. So how do we get to know what we lost? It's going to be a challenge. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy story. Because we don't have a catalog. Not even the registers that had the catalog. Everything was burned. So the only way is to go back to the people who have used the collection, talk to them. And that's not an easy thing, because it triggers all kinds of emotions. I have heard several stories, so much of nostalgia, so much of painful, so much of pain when they share, when they talk about the collection and what they have used and why they use and how helpful, useful it was for them. And the only way is to continue to mourn, and that is happening, and that will happen forever. In fact, a Requiem was written for the Jaffna Library as soon as this happened by Professor M.A. Nuhman. I thought I might read this poetry. It's a short poem. It goes like this: murder. Last night I dreamt Buddha was shot dead by the police. Guardians of the law, his body drenched in blood on the steps of the Jaffna Library. Under cover of darkness came the ministers. His name is not in our list. Why did you kill him? They asked angrily. No, sirs. No, there was no mistake. Without killing him, it was impossible to harm a fly. Therefore, they stammered. All right, then hide the corpse. The ministers returned. The men in civis dragged the corpse into the library. They heaped the books, 90,000 in all, and lit the fire with the Sikalo Kavatta Sutta. Thus, the remains of the compassionate one were burned to ashes along with the Dhammapada. How else to describe the entire situation? I think Professor Nuhman had beautifully written this moving poetry at that time in Tamil, which has been translated by S. Padmanabhan. Now, I would leave you there at just about the Jaffna Library and move on to the public library situation in Tamil Nadu. The Tamil Nadu Public Libraries Act was enacted in 1948. In fact, Tamil Nadu is the first state to enact a law for Public Library Act, and other states followed suit. And today we have nearly 4,634 public libraries in this region. And the role of if you take the role of public libraries, it has impacted people's life in many different ways. And I know that there is criticism about public libraries, government libraries, but I must say, after taking a survey, that the situation is actually different in Tamil Nadu. And I'm sure there is apathy, there are a lot of issues, discrepancies, but at the same time, the impact that it has created in public life for people, in people's life, is enormous. People go to libraries for reading, not just reading, but also for other purposes. Like one of the most important purposes is for preparing for civil services, both the Union Public Service Commission as well as the State Service Commission. I'd like to illustrate this through what's happening at the Anna Central Library. It's a special case. The Anna Central Library is a beautiful building which was constructed in probably one of the first and finest institutions that has been built in the post-independent India. And it has subjects, material on all subjects. It has books, periodicals, audio, video. It has children's section. There's a wonderful reference library. There's a braille section. There's an open air theater. It has seminar and conference facilities. They have excellent cafeteria. So it's a space not just for people who use the library, but also it is a tourist attraction. People may recall in those days, they used to, when people come from rural areas to the city, they visit the museum and the zoo. So now it does not stop with these two institutions. Now this also is Anna Central Library. I'd like to talk about these two sections. One, which is the children's section. Children's section is an interactive space. People, schools take children to this library, and also parents during weekends and holidays, they're taken there. A number of workshops take place for these children. They can play there. There's a playroom. They can play there. They can read books. So it's a fantastic space for them. There is one more section called the own book reading area. If we were to say that people do not go to visit libraries, then here is a case where you see in the Anna Central Library, much before the library is open in the morning, at least there's a very big queue of 1 hour before the library is open, just to use this own book reading area, where you can take your books and there is space for you. There's Wi-Fi access, it's air conditioned, so it's houseful all the time. And also people use the reference services when they want to refer any book. And again, this is one of the important spaces for people who prepare for civil services. And there are weekly talks by experts. So people will come and hang out in the library and then move on to listen to one of the lectures. And there's a neat training program, online resources like JSTOR, other online resources. Usually, these online resources are extremely expensive and available only in big academic institutions like IIT, IIM, and so on. So what do we do? As an ordinary researcher, if I want to access JSTOR, it's such an expensive thing. So the only location is to go to this Anna Central Library or a district central library. So this is the case that's been happening in the Anna Central Library. And then I would like to also share some of the inspiring stories in Tamil Nadu. So how libraries are functioning, how they are used. One more important thing I wanted to mention about the Anna Central Library is, sometime a few years back, the government wanted to shut the library for political reasons, and the people immediately came and protested. And they went to the court, saying that the library should be run. So the court ordered that the library should function, and the government should provide enough support to keep the library functions on. So here is a case where how people wanted a library. So moving to some of the stories, see how libraries are being used and how they can really function. One library, a motivated librarian, during the cyclone Gaja, raised funds for relief work. So all he did was to use WhatsApp messages, and he talked to people, and then he raised his money and also opened the library for the relief work so that people can come and use the space. In Tiruvarur, one man used to frequent this library and made use of the library, and he joined the police service. So he was inspired, and he thought he should come back and return it to the library. And so he came back to the library, and he offered training program for a group of students who were using the library. And a number of people after this training, joined for police service. In Tiruvannamalai, in one of the libraries, they conduct health camps for girl children. And in another library, people learn computers, how to use computers. In fact, it's not just for children, but also for elderly. And storytelling workshops for children, tailoring workshops. Also, there's an interesting story of where a person got into the civil services by using one district library or a local library in Anna Nagar in Chennai. So when he got into civil service, he talked about it, how he got into civil service, and he said how important this library was for him, and that was the first place where he experienced an air conditioner. To go and sit in an air conditioning room and reading was something very important at the time. So there are several such stories. There's one person, a very motivated librarian, who takes books in his two-wheeler and goes to different villages and meets school children and teach them how to read and also provide books for them to read, and he gets back. These are some of the efforts that I was mentioning. This is the first one is a plant clinic. Farmers use library space and they get to learn from the village knowledge centers. And then another case, AC mechanism is being trained. Training is given. Drawing competition, dental checkup, all sorts of things happen in a library space. This is the man from Totium Branch Library. He takes books, see how he carries the books to the library, and he provides them with all the reading material. They have started this mission called the 2022 Reading Mission. This is from Tiruvarur Public Library. In the entire region, in Tiruvarur region, this is being done. And this man you see here is Asay Thambi. He is the motivated librarian I was talking about. This is a computer literacy program for elderly at Totium Branch. Now I'd like to shift to the Roja Muthiah Research Library. We have these objectives as you see on the screen, but I must say very briefly about how this library was formed and came into being. There was this man called Roja Muthiah, who was a signboard artist in a village, in a place called Kottayur, down south of Tamil Nadu, near Pudukottai. In his lifetime, he had collected about 100,000 items, left behind this material when he died in 1992. And the collection was sold to the University of Chicago, and University of Chicago bought the entire material. And in collaboration with the local trust in Chennai, the entire thing was moved here, and that is how it was established in 1994. But Roja Muthiah, as a signboard artist, what really prompted him to collect material is a very interesting story. Because at the time, he started collecting in the late 40s, when India got freedom from the British. And when people were throwing all old things out of their houses and bringing in new things, here is this man who started collecting, taking those old material and taking it back in, and as a hobby, he started collecting them. And in his lifetime, he saw that there were 50,000 books and 50,000 other items, which includes periodicals, newspapers, and what's called as ephemera material, with, like the drama notices, drama pamphlets, theater pamphlets, cinema posters, and other wedding invitations and invitations for other events. So that was the kind of material that Roja Muthiah collected. The activities of Roja Muthiah, as you know, we were microfilming in the beginning to preserve material. Then when there is a shift in technology, we started digitizing, use state-of-art scanners, and we have moving racks where books are stored in these moving racks. And we have a new paper conservation laboratory, which was set up with the help of the Tata Trust. And we also have a research center called the Indus Research Center, which was started by Airava Mahadevan, and now it is headed by Mr. R. Balakrishnan. And as far as the collection is concerned, when we got the collection in 1994, it was 100,000 items, and now it is 400,000 items, the collection. So the collection has been expanding. Although initially, when the library was set up, it was imagined that in the first 10 years, all the material should be microfilm, and the library should be handed over to some university, and people who were working in the library will go to different institutions and spread the professional expertise that they have gained in the 10 years. Contrary to that, what has happened is the library itself has grown into a very big institution now. So RMRL is now used as considered as a cultural space, a very important cultural space in Chennai. Does not restrict preservation and conservation of archival material that is that it owns, but also it extends its services for people who need that kind of services, not only for institutions but also for individuals. And since 2005, monthly lectures have been conducted, and periodically exhibitions are also conducted. These lectures and exhibitions are not just targeted to scholarly people, but also for public, so that there is a public and scholar interaction that happens in that space. For every lecture, people in the neighborhood and people who are PhDs working on their PhDs and postdoctoral scholars, professors, and general public turn up for the event. And there is very nice interaction during these lectures and exhibitions. We've also had several theatre plays. One of the most important contemporary theatre is the Kuthupadrai. They have had several plays in this space, and also several documentaries have been screened. Recently, the Amazon has opened up something called the Kindle's Pen to Publish, suggesting that anybody can become an author. So somebody came up and asked that we should run a writer's workshop so that we can create more authors, and for them to use material. The library is always there, and the library material can be used. And also we've been thinking of running a research methodology course for researchers, and also which will include language as an important part, because people here, Tamil scholars, they find difficult. I'm talking about people who are taking PhD programs, who have studied MA Tamil and taking PhD programs. There is an inherent problem about language. So it is important for people to, lessen that burden. So we were thinking of including some kind of language training for them. And also oral history workshop. We have been talking to people at Photo Biennale to use this space for their programs. So these are some of the images from the exhibition, lectures, the theatre play, workshop, training program, and documentaries. This American in Madras was a very important documentary on Elisa Duncan, American director, and much of the material was taken from the library itself for this documentary. It was directed by Karan Bali, a very fine and sensible director. Now coming to the end of this, my presentation. There are several threads, but I would like to restrict myself to just a couple of things. When we're talking about collective memory and how vulnerable it is, you may recall my first slide, how libraries have been soft targets in history, and also it's not specific to a particular region. So there are cultural and religious groups all the time targeting these soft targets. Not only these groups, but in several cases, as in the case of the Jaffna Public Library, it was state-sponsored, either through imposition of something or by pulling the plugs, or indirectly or directly involved in such a destruction. For instance, the Anna Centennial Library, the government wanted to shut down. It was only the people who went to the court and stopped it. In the case of cultural and religious groups, for several of our lectures, we have been getting hate messages. I can give you one instance where in one of the lectures, I think it was a lecture on translations of Quran. One scholar, a very important scholar, was delivering this lecture, and we got these hate messages saying that religious conversion is happening in this library. We have actually tried to have different subjects and as much as neutral as possible, but it is difficult. At least we have only had these hate messages, but we do not know. We need to be extremely careful. There are several such instances, not just within Islam, but also we have got messages like this is missionary funded, foundation funded institution, and so on and so forth. So my point is, this threat is going to be there, not specific to a particular library, but to any library, any library, archives, or museum. Any cultural significance that it has, anything that has stored the collective memory of a particular community and its people, this threat is going to be there. How do we respond? I think we can learn a lot from the story of the Noolaham Foundation. Noolaham Foundation was set up by the diaspora of the Sri Lankan Tamils way back some 15 years, and they have learned one thing. After the burning of their library, they do not trust any physical library, but they are not against any physical library. But it triggers all sorts of emotions when we talk about a physical space, especially cultural material that is very dear to them, and they have to be preserved. It's understandably difficult because you cannot trust, even if it is your own government. So what they did was they digitized everything, and they are moving into cloud and keeping it in different locations. We all know that the Sri Lankan diaspora, Tamil diaspora, is all over the world, in Canada, America, in Australia, in Europe, and so on. So the material is now absolutely safe in different locations, and it's only through preservation of material through digitization. So they try to get money as much as possible from the diaspora to keep this activity on, and they have been fairly successful and have been pioneer in this area. What the Roja Muthiah Library is doing right now is learning from Noolaham Foundation. We are also moving into the cloud storage, especially through the archive.org, and we have started digitizing for them. And our collection will be exclusively shown also in the name of Roja Muthiah Library Collection and under the archive.org. While we are also trying to maintain the physical space and archive here. it is very important to have a two-pronged approach while taking care of the physical space, expanding the space into a cultural arena, but also for cultural activities and for different kinds of activities. And at the same time, you preserve your own material on the cloud and also use them. The Tamil diaspora is also spread through from the mainland, is spread all over the world. So people should take responsibility and make them available in different locations. I must also pay my tributes at this time to the very important initiative by the Punjab National Library. Punjab Digital Library, where when the Sikh, during the Sikh riots in the 80s, when several Sikh collections were burnt, they did not want to take support from any government. So they organized, the diaspora organized funding for them, and they ensured that all the collection will be digitized. And they also have a similar program for preserving their cultural memory. So the future is, the library as a physical space is very important. The library through virtual portal is also very important. Many people ask this question, is a physical library relevant today? So we must remember that very recently, China opened one of the biggest libraries in the world. So there will be, the physical library will still be relevant, and we should continue to work on that. So I'd like to thank with this all these people that I have listed here, starting from Padmana Iyer, Himal, they asked me to write this paper on the Jaffna Public Library, and because of which I was able to research a little bit about the library. Asif Thambi from Totium branch, who provided me with all the images and what they are doing in the local libraries. The district library officer in Chennai, Anna Central Library, and of course Dr. Venkat Srinivasan at NCBS. Now, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks so much, Sundar. That was so nice to get this very broad overview that you've shared. So the Q&A is open for people if you have any questions to ask. One thing that I did want to bring up, Sundar, you talked about the threats to the library. I'm just thinking libraries as public spaces or even as centers of knowledge. I mean, one obvious other threat, which is more slow moving, is a general sense of apathy. So I'm curious to know, I mean, when you see populations like this, you talk about the Sri Lankan diaspora, you talk about various groups that have come together to resurrect spaces. I'm curious to know if there are examples of that kind of work in the domestic space as well, within a city, or are there any examples that you have of? I mean, you shared many of these examples from across Tamil Nadu, but I'm curious to know about other spaces in the country. In Bangalore in particular, I'm curious to know about this, the sense of apathy towards the public library.
I really do not have any information about the situation in Karnataka. But in Tamil Nadu, within the communities here, I wouldn't say that there's that kind of a feeling, but definitely with certain things that is happening in the country, the diaspora seems to be very sensitive to some of these ideas and things that is happening, especially with libraries and heritage, and that needs to be preserved. You can see this as an example. Why was a chair being made for a Tamil chair being made in the Harvard University? So it was people who pulled in money, and they wanted to set up a chair. So that kind of a feeling, is there because of now people think that my heritage is being targeted. When that feeling comes, people will raise to the occasion.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, in place like Bangalore, there's been a very strong culture, at least historically, of visiting the public library in the urban space. In a way that when I've visited the spaces more recently, the demographics are very different than what it might have been. But still, there's a strong hope. But what you've raised, you talked about how the Anna Centenary Library sort of function, has these various functions that it takes on, not just a space for the books. And I think that's sort of a role that the library plays in the community. If there, I don't know if there are more systematic ways, are there any systematic top-down ways around these things, or do you?
Yeah, yes and no, because in several libraries in Tamil Nadu, it is the individual librarians who are motivated. On the one hand, we know that libraries, are dull places because of the person who is guarding the library. But in several places, it's really very interesting and exciting to work with, because these young librarians are absolutely charming, because they read a lot, and they want to do a lot. They want to bring some kind of change. And also sometimes when there is, in Tamil Nadu, the libraries come under school education department. And we had a wonderful commissioner for school education. Very briefly, you can actually see the difference before and after he came in. So when there is a change in God, and the top man, through certain small changes, he can bring a big change in the entire society, especially in libraries. So for nearly 2-3 years, the Anna Central Library became a happening place. And before that, it was not so much, because of, it was a different person who was heading the department.
Right. Okay. I have a few more questions, but I'm just going to move to the audience here for a moment, and I'll see if I can get those in. Maya had a very quick question about, let me just see if I can get her to unmute herself. Just a second.
Oh yeah, I think she's asked.
But maybe, yeah.
The library, the largest library in the world. It sounded like a recent creation. Oh, it's not the largest library in the world. It's the Anna Centenary Library in Chennai, which is one of the biggest libraries, holding a big collection, but it's certainly not the largest in the world.
Got it. I'm just going to ask, is Pavitra, if you're around, could you possibly unmute Yogesh? He had a couple of questions, and I'm unable to unmute him.
Yeah, just unmuting him.
Thank you.
One second. Maybe he can, Yogesh, right? Yeah.
Yogesh, are you able to go ahead? I mean, if you could just ask your questions, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm in a car and it's going to be a little noisy, so please forgive me.
Thanks.
I have a few questions. Well, why don't governments, state or central, advertise impacts of public libraries more widely among the public to increase readership? It seems very counterintuitive that they don't do this much. That is my first question. Should I continue with the questions or should I wait for the answer?
Yeah, please ask your question.
Yeah, the second thing is, how well funded are public libraries in India in general and Tamil Nadu in particular? And will are funding the only problems that libraries have? Can we throw money at the problem and solve it? And if it is not the only problem, then what else can the government do in order to increase the quality and accessibility to libraries? And what can the public do to nudge the governments to invest more in public libraries in terms of money or other resources, including manpower and the rest? Thanks.
Done?
Yeah, thanks, Yogesh.
Okay. There are two questions. One, you asked about why they are not advertising the impact of public libraries. Well, the government does advertise. It's not as a means of advertising, but through their annual reports, they say how many people visit the library. See, there are certain things which are tangible. When you want to go back for funding, there are certain important parameters they look for. So they only bring in those elements. But actually, the impact can be shown in a much better way. I agree with you. They should advertise what kind of work they're doing. But the problem here is, I'm afraid I have to say this. The man on the top does not like the person who, if there is some good work that is done at the lower levels. So this problem is an inherent problem in our country. So they do not really show these parameters. But in this information is available in public domain. Now through Facebook and other social media, these things people get to know very easily. But I agree with you that they should be reported as part of the government official reports. I agree with you on that. And your second question on funding, whether there's enough funding, I think the funding is really not enough for libraries, because libraries become the last priority for people, for any government. And if you see there is a cess for library, we pay tax, and there is a cess, library cess. So what happens to this money? I'm not sure if this money is actually put to the rightful use for the library. Probably they are being siphoned to some other projects. So that is why they are not maintained quite well. And many libraries, there are no full-time staff. They are only on contractual basis. Their positions are not in order yet. So this is the issue we have been facing. And also, we need to provide a lot of soft skills for the people who are heading the libraries. They simply lack these soft skills. They don't even in many libraries, people don't smile. Now, this has been a problem which I've been hearing again and again. So I heard this. I was invited for a lecture, and there was a co-speaker, and this man came up and he gave this, before he started his lecture, he said, if there is hell and there is heaven, all these librarians will go to hell. That's what he said. So that kind of very sad thing that he had to say. That's because of the state of the library. So yes, I think there should be more funding for libraries. With funds and proper training, it is possible, and also the right man on the top, it is possible.
Thanks, Sundar. Indra had a comment, and I was wondering if Indra, you could just share that, of course, if you're able to unmute yourself, and you could just share your...
Can you hear me? I have unmuted myself.
Yes, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Sundar. I just wanted to thank you because, I really enjoyed your talk. And, one of the observations I had is that, you talk about how important it is for libraries to have the support of the public. And I think this is something we are seeing again and again. And you showed us instances where the library is doing much more than just providing a reading space. It's also providing other kinds of programs like computer literacy, etc. And in fact, the Anna Library example where people actually go to court saying you cannot shut down this library brought to mind a book that series we edit called Public History, International Public History, where we published Pavel Macevich's book. It's called The War That Never Ends. Now, this man was asked to create a museum of World War II in Gdansk in Poland. And he did that. But when he did that, the government changed. And they did not want the kind of, museum he was setting up, which didn't show enough Polish nationalism. And he said, that's not my, mandate. I have to show you Museum of World War II. And they said, well, there are bulldozers sitting outside. We are going to really break down this library, this museum. And what he did with his team was remarkable, because he opened the museum, which was full of memorabilia collected from the public, much ahead of its official opening. And since then, people have crowded into that museum and the bulldozers have just stood there. Now, of course, it's functioning. They can't shut it down. They have sacked him. They've sacked his team, but they're trying to tell a different story through his pictures. But what I'm saying is here, it was the public that actually prevented this museum from being knocked down. So I just wanted to share that to say even libraries need that kind of, interface with the public, in moments. It's not just because governments come and go and then they stop support at some point. But thank you for reminding us about that.
For sharing this.
Thanks so much, Indra. Thank you. Jitu, you also had a comment. I wanted to know if you just wanted to elaborate on that, or should we, if you're able to unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, wonderful talk. Thank you so much for doing this. Actually, I have a more sort of philosophical question. I mean, libraries, in some senses, have always, posed as threats to different sets of people. Time immemorial, right? I mean, Borges and writes about this, and of course, we have so many instances in our own country, in the recent past, where libraries that carry books of things that groups of people object to get destroyed. And as you mentioned, even the library in Jaffna. I was thinking more about the Pune. The library that contained the books of this PhD scholar in Pune. But so clearly, I mean, they are seen, as you said, as soft targets and threats. But I think it would be useful, I mean, in today's world, to think about, and also, ironically, China building up the world's largest library when it also destroys its own cultural heritage for whatever reasons. But it would be useful to think about how, in today's world, one could create a way by which, the very material that's in a library could be indestructible. You did mention cloud storage and things like that. But I think more importantly, building up sort of collaborative platforms that don't have these individual spaces which get isolated and therefore can be targeted. So I think I'm just thinking, because this is really world heritage. It's not just a local sort of knowledge that is destroyed. This is world sort of heritage of the world that is being destroyed when precious books are being annihilated by people. So I was just wondering, how do you respond to this today? I mean, we don't seem to be learning from the past, is what I'm expressing a level of frustration here.
If I may just add to Jitu's question, Sundar, there's another question that came in through the YouTube, the people who are watching on there. And there's a person, Prasoon, who's probably echoing what Jitu is saying, where he says, I quote, if they can't burn it, they will block access. Access to digital information is made illegal or drowned in state-sponsored propaganda. What do you think about commons or publicly held distributed data, which I think echoes a component of what Jitu was mentioning. So, yeah.
Yes, I think that's very important. There are several, every state has a library association, if I'm not wrong. There is also a library association for the whole country. There are several library associations. These library associations are supposed to take on this kind of issues and tasks. But unfortunately, the library associations here, at least in Tamil Nadu, they're ripped with their own political issues. There are several factions, and they don't seem to understand or work on this kind of a problem. But that is why what happens. The international collaborations are really working out very well. At least in the case of the Roja Muthiah Library, we have since Originally, the collection was held by the University of Chicago, and it was a joint project. This collaboration continues even after that project was over in several different ways. And there are initiatives called the South Asia Open Archives Initiative, where some institutions in South Asia and in the US have got together to form this forum. And there are other efforts like the South Asia Microfilm Project and the Endangered Archives Project in the British Library, which are actually helping not only to create awareness, but also to safeguard these very important cultural material. And what is important is there should be at least one institution in India which models this kind of initiatives and come forward to support such initiatives. But unfortunately, this has not happened in India because, as I said earlier, the priorities are completely different. So that's why we also ask the support of the diaspora, who seem to understand these sensitive issues. Because for them, it is a when they go and they have made money, they have made something big, and now they want to do something, and they want their identity becomes very important. So that is the time when they can think of these issues.
Right. No, thank you. I think that was very perceptive. Yeah.
Thanks.
Also, if I can just quickly add, I noticed a TIFR tome lying behind your head. Not Venkat.
That's Ramanujan's notebook that was restored by the Roja Muthiah Library.
I see. But why is it bound by TIFR cover? Was it published by TIFR?
Originally published in 1957 by TIFR.
I see. Interesting. Yeah.
Centenary celebrations, they came to us asking to restore the book so that they can publish it again.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, interesting connection. I don't know if Venkat has mentioned to you about the collaboratorium that he's setting up.
No.
No, but Sundar, we briefly talked about when I first met you about trying to set up a consortium of archives able to sort of speak to each other. But yeah, these are small steps that hopefully we'll get to at some point. But all the challenges that you're mentioning are there, and and Prasun, who asked the question about distributed systems, is also one of the people who's leading this charge of trying to set up the platform. There is another comment from YouTube from Chandrakant, who talks about an interesting story of how the saint Tukaram was forced to drown his poems in the water, and the people collectively recited his poems from all over, and in a way there was a certain resurrection of his knowledge by the recitations that were happening. So I suppose there is this constant effort to try and look for the commons and look for ways in which the stories still thrive. We don't have an awful lot of time left, Sundar, but maybe I'll wrap up with Akila, who has a nice, maybe a slightly...
You asked one extra question, for which I did not respond. You said maybe we should think about Creative Commons. Am I right? That's the one you asked a little while ago.
Well, Prasun's question was broader. His question was about how do you think about the commons, or how do you think about the knowledge captured in libraries like this being distributed in some common space? So not necessarily Creative Commons, but sort of having it in a distributed platform like this.
That is very, very important, especially in a country like in countries like South Asia. It is very, very important to think like that, and that is why we wanted to put up our collection on the internet.org.
Right. Oh, that's the RMRL archive.org collection that you have there. Yeah. I should probably put the link for that also into the chat window. That's an amazing collection. On a personal note, I've shared it with family members who are absolutely thrilled to be able to look at this since they don't live in Chennai. So thanks for doing that on a personal note. Akila, would you like to share your thoughts if you're able to speak?
Yes. Am I audible? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead. Thank you.
So I had picked up a collection of books about 300, 400 books long back, about 30 years back, from an old circulating library, Tamil library. There are very good books. Now I have about one half of the collection. I want to give off. I don't feel like throwing. I have read many, and slowly it is getting over. I want to give it to somebody where possibly I can give, preferably Chennai, or
Which are they in?
old books of Kalki, Vindan, Devan.
Oh, please consider donating to the Roja Muthiah Library.
Yeah, sure. That would be nice. Thank you so much. The lecture was very informative and many things were very new to me. Thank you so much. It was a very good lecture.
Sundar, so in general, actually, if people want to get in touch with the library, what would you say? They just use the email address on the website? Is that the best way to do it?
Yes.
Okay.
rmrl@data1.in.
Okay, yeah. So I've shared the link for that. So it's there in the chat window for people to have a look at. This is a tempting question. Maybe we'll just wrap with this one because it has a broader sort of looking forward. And this is a question from Rosanna. Let me just see if I can get Rosanna to just ask it out. Rosanna, if you're able to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, sort of where you're talking about public engagement.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, so for a library, the participation from the public is really important. We cannot do this without public being involved, right? So many libraries, such as the images you shared today, they are being forgotten. They're just sitting there and getting damaged. So how can libraries reach out to the public and grab some attention so that all this wouldn't go to waste? It's a real shame.
Sorry, for me, it was not very clear. Can you please repeat that, please?
Yeah, so I think what Rosanna is asking was what can libraries do to sort of get the attention of the public back in a way that there is this conversation where you start building up this, dialogue between the library and the citizens that are in the community. If you had any suggestions around that, yeah.
Well, there are many things that we can do, like what we are doing. You can organize a lecture, you can organize a book review, you can screen a documentary or a world cinema. Engage a small group of people to begin with. I think it will organically grow. Or invite somebody who is an expert, some sort of, not a well-known person, but who is an expert in some area from the neighborhood, and ask him for her to give a talk about that subject. So slowly people will start coming in.
Yeah, no, I do hope that happens. The questions are constantly coming through, Sundar. Do you have time for another one?
Yep, sure.
So Jeet, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but if I am, could you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, Sundar sir, are you able to hear me?
Oh, Sujit, how are you? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir. I attended the session late, unavoidable circumstances. I very much wanted to be a part of this right from the beginning. I'm very, very sorry. Sorry about this. And 1 minute, sir, the host of this thing, if you could make the whole session available offline, it will be very helpful. Now, Sundar sir, are you able to hear me? Can I ask my question?
Go ahead, Sujit.
Okay, sir, we've spoken about this multiple times of the thing, and I'm happy to see several of the materials of RMRL are starting to appear on internetarchive.org. And I'm very thankful for the library for assisting and making a lot of these materials available. Now, we already know that there are already some pre-digitized materials which are already available in RMRL campus, which can be read on the computer, like Cinema Ulagam series, etc. And so what I would like to know is, what is the order of the materials which will come up on Internet Archive? Is there some priority list, or the pre-digitized materials have a stronger possibility of coming out? Or is it category-specific material which is going to come out first? Or is it going to be pre-digitized material which is going to come out first? Or
what is the thing going forward? That's my question, sir.
Right. So the priority is like this. First, out of copyright material, which are out of copyright and which are already digitized, and we're slowly sending batches of files to the Internet and they'll be ingesting the entire material, and they'll be making them available in batches. But again, to begin with, what we're thinking is to make the Sri Lankan publications, Tamil publications, available first, and then other publications which have been published from Tamil Nadu or other locations in India. In that order, that's a plan we have. And also, it will be followed by periodicals slowly.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sujit, and thanks. The questions are constantly coming through. But Yogesh, just in the interest of time, we'll keep this. We'll probably wrap up now, and I'll probably wrap up with a comment from Dr. Ratnakar. I'm sure Sundar, you know him very well, who has been watching this and who said that a visit to the RMRL is a must for every student of library information sciences and the students of the archives. And it's a comment that I highly second. So if you're in Chennai, I encourage you to go visit this place. With that, thank you very much for your time. We'll see you again in January, on January 15th, where we will be talking about utopian spaces. So do see if you can make time for that. But for now, we wish you a good new year, and we'll see you next month. Thanks again.